In this video, I'd like to look at an Android app that has a shared preference, which is sort of like a cookie, sort of remembering something from a previous running of the program. The code can be found at the URL C. Okay, so this is a relatively fresh instance, and so we're going to see that these values that we're seeing in our interface are the default values. So when you set up a shared preference, you have a default value that if nothing is remembered, that will be the value. So at this stage, we are seeing the default value of a username John Doe, a user age of 1, a user wage of $7.25, a Seekbar value of 49, and a flavor of vanilla. But let's change some of these things. Let's make it Jane Doe now, who is, I don't know, 45 and makes $17.25 an hour. The Seekbar will now be 72. We'll choose chocolate, and then we'll say that we're going to save these values for the next time by clicking the button. Then I'm going to stop and start again. And now so we've stopped the program, restarted the program, and let me do it again, just so you can see the interface. So this is some previous program, and now I'm starting up this current program with the shared preference, and now it's reading in these remembered values from shared preferences: Jane Doe 45, 17.25, 72, chocolate. Okay, so that's the purpose of shared preferences, to remember something from a previous running of the program. Okay, so the main activity, the activity main, the layout, there's not much to. You saw the interface. There's a text view for the username and an edit text for the username. Text view then says user age, and an edit text for that, and it's of the number type. The type will be important in the shared preferences. So that's why those two are considered different, value different. And here's a wage and an edit text for that. And so this edit text is a number decimal. And those are going to be all different types: a string type, an integer type, a float type, when we're doing the shared preference. I'm doing a Seekbar. And in terms of the shared preference, this is just going to be an integer that's remembered, but we're going to show how to set the Seekbar to get it positioned to the place that was remembered. So this is just a text bar saying there was some Seekbar. Here is the actual Seekbar, and then here is a text view sort of displaying the text. And so the displayed text by default was 50, but when we first opened it up, it was 49 because that was the default value read in the shared preference, and then it was set to 49 rather than this design value of 50. And then here is a text view that just says choose a flavor, and in the spinner, we don't have any of the values that we loaded up in code, and we'll show how to choose the user's choice. And then here was the button we had that saved our shared preferences. Okay, so over to the main activity. I have an array of flavors: vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. I have a username, an age, a wage, a progress, a flavor index. So these are my variables for the things that I'm going to remember. And instead of remembering vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry, I'm going to remember its index. So that's what I'm going to save, is going to be an integer. Here's my connection to the interface. The edit text username, age, wage, the button for saving, the Seekbar for the progress, the text view for showing the progress, and the spinner for the flavor. Okay, and now the important topic at hand here is the shared preference. So we are declaring here that we're going to use the shared preference. I'm declaring it here in onCreate because that's all I have in this instance. But if I wanted to remember in different events, I might declare this more globally. Okay. And then I give, this is just something I made up. So this is my shared preference demo. So that's what this stands for. It's just a name of sort of the namespace of the shared preferences. Then the shared preferences will be given this name. And then it used to be that there were different versions of how they were stored. Now they want you to store them sort of with some kind of encryption. So the mode is almost always private. And here is this for writing the shared preference where you will need an editor. Okay, so that's just saying that we're going to have shared preference. So now the way I've written the code here, we're getting the values before we're putting the values. That imagines something might have already been stored. But here we're getting the username. So we're going to the shared preferences and we're getting, and here's the type, getting a string. And these are name value pairs. And so then the key here, the key value pair, the key is username. And then the default value is John Doe. So when we first ran the program and there was nothing saved in the shared preference, it came up as John Doe. But it will read, if there's something saved, as we saw later, then it was Jane Doe, then that's what we put in. So now we're getting the, next we're getting the age shared preference, which is an integer, and a shared and a default value of 1. Then we're getting the wage shared preference, and it was a float. And the default value is 725, a little f here to force it to be a float. The shared preference for the progress, we started off at 49. And the shared preference, again, we're not doing vanilla chocolate strawberry, we are doing the index. So the default index was 0, which was the first element, which was vanilla, but later on it was remembered to be, I think, 2 for chocolate. Okay, so this is us going out to the shared preferences and getting all those values. And then I'm going to next put those values into the display, except for the spinner. That's a little more complicated, so I'll save that for near the end. But here, setting the text to the username, setting the text to the age, the quote here sort of helps, is just a cheap way of casting the age as a string, so we can use it to set the text. Here we're getting the username and we're doing a little formatting. So if they remembered something with more than 2 decimal places, I'm forcing it to just have 2 decimal places. Setting the progress of the Seekbar to the progress, and setting the text of the TV progress to also to prog. So that's displayed in 2 ways. Okay, now here is the click event for the save button. And so I am getting, now the user may have in the meantime changed any of these, may have worked with the progress, may have changed the Seekbar, may have edited the username, the age, or the wage, or gone to the spinner and changed the value. And so we're getting these new values from the interface, the username from EditText username, the age from the EditText age, and we're parsing it as an integer. So what we get out of an EditText is text, and then we cast it as an integer. Same thing for the wage here. We're getting it out of the text and then casting it as a float, getting the progress from the Seekbar and getting the selected item ID from the spinner. And this might have been a long, so here we are casting it as an int. Okay, so now we're going to the button. The purpose of the button was to save these things as a shared preference. So now previously we used get, now we're going to use put. And so, and again, in the get method and in the put method, the type played a role. So we have to pay attention to the type. So we're putting a string in the key called username, whatever we just got from the user as the username. The age is an integer, the wage was a float, the progress was also an integer, and the flavor index was an integer. And then when we're writing to the shared preferences, we must say apply. So I liken this to a commit and a database interaction, sort of like this is all good and fine and says what you want to do, but it doesn't actually happen until you say apply. Okay. The shared preference, again, the stored value has a type. And then so when you bring it in, you have a type. When you put it out, you have a type. You must sort of respect that type. I had an interesting debugging situation where somebody I was working with had changed the type while they were running the program. And then they were getting a type conflict. And all the code looked fine. The get and the put all had the same type, but what was remembered in the shared preference was the previous type. And so there was this type mismatch when you were using a get and trying to bring in this previously stored shared preference of the wrong type. And if something like that were to happen, then what you need to do is, I think it's tools. Yes, go to your AVD manager, find your, in my case, my emulator, and wipe the data. So that will into any sort of programs I have installed on the emulator, but also the corresponding shared preferences. And that will sort of wipe it clean, and then we can sort of reinstall, and it will be a clean slate in terms of shared preferences. Okay, here is just my Seekbar event. So this is just as I'm moving the Seekbar, I'm updating this value here. So this is the Seekbar event, and there is a before, a during, and an after. And I'm only working with the during, and I'm changing the text of the TV to the progress value cast as a string. Okay. Now, when I read all my shared preferences in sort of at the beginning and updated all of my widgets except for the spinner, because the spinner is more complicated. So here is, I had my array at the top, but now I'm setting up my array adapter based on that. Here's my flavors array. And then I am using that array adapter to populate my spinner, and then I'm making the spinner event. So I'm just doing a toast. So when you choose something, when I choose here now, strawberry, I'm just getting this toast value. So that's what I'm doing here in my select event. Or, yes, my on item selected listener for my spinner. But now that I have the spinner set up, then I can use my shared preference, the value that I got from my shared preference, and I can use my spinner flavor dot set selection and set it to that index. Okay, so I couldn't do that when I did the other ones because I had not yet populated my spinner, and so there was nothing to there was nothing to select, so I couldn't use the index to select something because there were no items to select. So it had to wait till I populated my spinner. So that's why this one's sort of far from the others. And then there I am on create and the end of it and main activity. So that's what I wanted to show you. Thanks very much for your attention.